the Religion Lorecast. I'm sorry I messed that up. I'm a little bit nervous. Today, we are joined by an excellent guest, an awesome guy, and I'm going to get to him in a second. So, the three players for today is where we are going to do an overview of the religion of Christianity,
Mhm.
one of the most, if not the most important religions in the entire world. We're going to talk about it in overarching terms and over time drill more into it over more episodes. So, the players for today is yours truly, Devin. All right, from Beetle Milk, do my own stuff, and I'm here to hang out. My friend Nick. Nick
Hello.
is from Lorecast. He is awesome, and he is here to help you learn. And then our friend Benny, who is also a core member of Lorecast, him and Nick, and he is our resident subject matter expert on the subject of Christianity. We brought him on to kind of clarify some points for us and kind of help us and point us in the correct direction to make sure that we are not putting out bad information.
Mhm.
Gentlemen, how are you doing today?
Pretty good.
Doing absolutely fine.
Those are quite the accolades, dude. I don't know if I would. I don't know if I would paint myself with that brush, but I'm flattered.
I truly believe that it is always best to paint people with the nicest brush possible.
Mhm.
So, all right, cool. So, the first thing we're gonna do today, I guess, I don't know, maybe I'm taking. The first thing that we're gonna do is we are actually going to do an introduction to the religion of Christianity. Now,
Mhm.
to everybody who's listening, do understand that this is our first official religion episode. So if it's a little bit scattered, a little bit weird, or whatever, please bear with us. We're figuring it out just like you are. Okay.
Mhm. And
So
like we said, we'll do like update videos if we get anything wrong or if anything's out of the order. Uh, we'll touch it up later.
yeah, it'll be touched up and cleaned up a
Mhm.
little bit.
Mhm.
So first of all, if I could, I want to give a few quick facts about Christianity as a whole before we drill down.
Mhm.
Okay. The first one is that Christianity is a part of the trio of Abrahamic religions. Okay, so that is Christianity, Islam is one, and then Judaism is the other one. Now, Christianity actually is an offshoot of Judaism. Okay, so Judaism was first. Christianity started officially when Jesus Christ started allowing non-Jews into his religion. Well, really, it was Paul the Apostle, who allowed it to happen. Once that happened, Christianity had to split off because the Jewish community at that point was not okay with Gentiles being a part of their religion. Today, Christianity is the largest religion in the world, if I remember correctly. It composes 33% of the entire world as of a few years ago. It has probably grown since then. In
Mhm.
America, Christianity composes 65% of the entire national makeup of religious belief. And I believe right after that is Judaism. And then everybody else is kind of a little bit lower,
Little mishmash of everything.
little mishmash. Yeah. So regarding Abraham and the Abrahamic religion, think something that I thought was interesting was Paul the Apostle referred to him as the father of us all. And in the case of all of those three religions, that is absolutely true. Although there is debate on whether Judaism, excuse me, not Judaism, whether Islam, I believe, is an Abrahamic religion or not. And so that's kind of where it stands today. And it's really interesting. And so we should probably get into core beliefs. Nick, you want to talk about it?
Uh, Absolutely. Christianity is a monotheistic, meaning one God. They believe in one God, and He created everything in this in the context of Christianity. You have God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. They are all the same God, separated from each other, but still the same God. It's called the Trinity. Um, Christianity, the core beliefs of that is everything happened in the Old Testament, which is Judaism, which is God created everything, um, the heavens and the earth, everything, all the animals and humans. And then he made humans to sort of be a steward of this earth that he created and gave us special, I don't want to say dominance, but he set us apart and we are created in his image. That's why we look like this, because we look like God. And everything up until the New Testament is all Judaism, and then we get into when Jesus was born, and Jesus, I don't know how to explain it. He was a prophet at the time, and he's God the Son, so he would spread the word of him and his Father, and they were bringing everyone together. I'm trying to read this in an unbiased way. Let's see. But Jesus died on the cross for your sins. He took upon the sins of the world and defeated the grave and sin as we know, as it was back in the day. I would say that's like the main things is God created everything. Jesus died on the cross for your sins, and then the Holy Spirit was given to us on the day of Pentecost as the free roaming version of God. Is
So
the easy way to say.
the interesting thing is there are differing interpretations of exactly the nature of Jesus's martyrdom.
Mm.
And I think we'll get into that a little bit later. But it's also there's differing ideas on whether Jesus was actually whether he was God incarnate, which means he was a human-bodied version of God, or whether he was actually the Son of God. There's a little bit of debate about that going on, which I find very fascinating. I actually did not know that there was splits.
Within
And
Christianity, or is that with other religions that say that?
this is within Christianity.
Okay.
Yeah. So the if I can
Yes.
talk about
Please.
so the concept of the Trinity is uh it's exclusive to Christianity, and it's very hard to wrap your head around how you have God the Father, God the Son, God the
Yeah.
Holy Spirit.
I didn't know how to
They're
explain
all
it well.
yeah. Well, it's supposed to be hard in a way, or it's very hard. People have been arguing about this for ages throughout Christian history, and the what it is God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. They are separate, like you said, but they are oh my gosh, three
Yeah.
in one.
Yeah.
They're of the same substance, co-equal in glory and power, I believe is a technical definition. It's actually a very funny video about how Saint Patrick tries to explain the Trinity,
I've
and he
actually
fails
seen this.
epically.
Mm.
Yeah, and he fails epically, but that's the
Mm.
point. Like you can't. There are no good metaphors for the Trinity, and something we'll talk about next week. The Great Schism. It's what separated the first division in Christianity. I believe it was in the 1300s. The Great Schism. I could be off about that, but it was over the Trinity.
Mm.
Essentially, is what it was.
The formal rupture
and,
was in 1054, as far as I could tell.
Mm.
That's
and
I don't know if that's the Great Schism. Yeah, no, the East. That's the East-West Schism of 1504.
yeah, that's how you get the Catholic Roman Catholic Church and Eastern Orthodox Church, and once again we'll talk about that next week. But I like if I just can talk about what Nick just said about Jesus dying on the cross. That is the central figure in Christianity, regardless of your branch or denomination. So to put it in the gospel in a nutshell is what it is that God created man. Man sinned. Sin and death entered into the world. And according to Paul, and he mentioned Paul in the New Testament, the whole point of the Old Testament, of the law, as it's known, is to prove to us that we can't reach God by ourselves as humans because we will always fall short. Jesus came, God the Son, incarnate, lived a perfect life, died on the cross for our sins, like Nick said, because he lived a perfect and holy life that only through him can a person have a relationship with God. That's But yes, Nick is right that Jesus' martyrdom is what marks it's the pinnacle point
Hmm.
in Christianity.
I had forgotten
So
also you have the resurrection right after the martyrdom,
Oh man,
which is
yes.
also it's the second half. It's that's the two main points is Jesus died and then he came back on the third day. He
well, he
went up to
descended to
heaven.
hell.
Yes, Abraham's bosom, I believe.
No, Abraham's bosom
I'm
was
wrong.
where. Wait, oh my God. Abraham's bosom was descended into hell, but I think he also went into Abraham's bosom and released all the essentially the souls of the people who died before Christ.
So
I thought that was in hell. It was separated. There was a gigantic gap between hell and Sheol or the bosom of Abraham. I thought it was down in hell. That's what I was told.
Hey, that part I'm sketchy about,
Because Sheol
because
is.
it's yeah, it's a fine detail that I
Hmm.
just. But I like what you did say about the important part is really the resurrection, because
so
Paul talks about. I'm sorry, go ahead.
thank you. It's uh, one of the main points to the resurrection was actually to free us of a little problem that we got when as humans when we were created and when Eve took the bite out of that apple or whatever fruit it was.
Hmm.
And that was something that is known by two names that I was able to find. The first one is original sin. The second one
Hmm.
is total depravity. Okay, so
Hmm.
the idea is that we as humans are inherently flawed, and there's nothing we can do about it. And it's from birth. We basically have a tax that we have to pay to the divine due to where we come from. And this is not um, the total depravity doesn't actually interestingly really deal so much with the outside, right? So it's not really talking about what you do as you move through the world. This is an interesting trap. This is an interesting trap, kind of like the idea that like God can read your mind. And the reason I say that is because total depravity actually deals with the inside. So even if
Hmm.
outwardly you live a holy life and you live a life of a good human, inside you and I know that inside you got some stuff that you wouldn't want put into a book and read. And so the idea of total depravity and original sin is that your internal life will never be good enough for the divine. And so Jesus' martyrdom, when he was martyred,
Hmm.
um, allows us to actually bypass this condition that we were given from birth. So there's a few different interpretations of why Jesus was martyred. I mean, because if you get into purely into semantics, he was martyred for being a blasphemer. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, so that's another fascinating thing that I found while kind of looking into things, and that is basically using Jesus as a way to get around original sin because he died for something that he did not do.
Right.
It wasn't his fault that we are what we are.
Hmm.
So
Right. Well, I like how you bring up total depravity because it's actually like the first um, description of Calvinism, which we'll talk
Yeah,
about
during
next
the
week.
Protestant Reformation there.
As the tea and tulip.
Hmm.
So, and if you read like in the Bible, particularly in the Gospel, Jesus is always the change is always from the inside out. Like
Hmm.
you were saying, total depravity is an inside thing. Um, and it is. We're inherently, according to the Christian doctrine, we're inherently depraved, which is why you don't have to teach a child to not lie and to not steal. Like it's in
Hmm.
us to do that, to sin. And so you're right, Devin. You know, Jesus did die and resurrected, um, so that once again, so that we can have that relationship with God. Because and I like how I totally forgot, to bring up the resurrection, because Paul says, I can't remember in what book in the New Testament, that if it wasn't for the resurrection, if Jesus had not come back from the dead, then there's no point to any of this.
Hmm.
he said, if Christ was not raised, then all of our preaching is useless, and your trust in God is useless.
Hmm.
Was the quote that he said. I don't remember. I don't see exactly where it's from though.
I can't remember the book, but yeah, it's basically
Oh, Corinthians 15:14. 1
First Corinthians.
Corinthians 15,
First.
14.
Okay, yeah,
1 Corinthians.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
so
that's
Mhm.
the and that's the principal tenet, I would say. Like, if you if you don't listen to anything we else we say on this podcast, that's the
Mhm.
the crucial one. And you're right. Like, there are divisions, and uh, people have still been arguing about why did Jesus die, or what was to kill
Mhm.
them. There are definitely different
because
interpretations of it.
they originally the way they did it was that Jesus went through all of this actually for the purpose of uniting from what I saw from the purpose of uniting Gentiles and Jews, right? Basically under one roof. And then later on, though,
Mhm.
over time, it evolved into this process called theosis or divinization, which basically Jesus' sacrifice and you believing in him and doing everything that you need to do in that situation actually helps cleanse your soul to make you suitable for the divine. Okay, so the process is called theosis. Technically, another one is that being saved satisfies the wrath of God for the sinfulness of humans.
Mhm.
So these are all differing ideas that basically revolve around the same idea, but they're just slightly different interpretations. Um, I find the one about satisfying the wrath of God because of the Old Testament God. I find that incredibly fascinating. Um, but so, and then there's also the idea that it was paid. It was a price that was paid for
Mhm.
our sin, and that's why Jesus did it. And lastly, the amazing what I call the amazing grace and salvation, which is basically a gift for the unworthy.
Mhm.
Jesus
That's-
bestowed upon us a
Mhm.
gift that we aren't worthy of, and it's our decision
Mhm.
whether we want to accept it or not.
Mhm.
So,
So
Also known as grace, because grace, that's the definition of grace, is getting something you don't deserve. That's a big word in Christianity, at least that I have seen, is grace.
yeah, because in the grand scheme of it all,
Mhm.
God didn't have to do any of this,
Mhm.
right? He didn't have to create humans. He didn't have to provide an atoning sacrifice for us. The way I like to describe grace is not fair, right?
Mhm.
God doesn't give us what we deserve. Because if God gave us what we deserve, what we truly deserve, we would all go to hell. Like, we would just all be destroyed. But because of that grace, He holds back what we deserve, and He gives us what we don't deserve. There's actually a great line by this band Relient K that says, "The beauty of grace is that it makes life not fair." And so, and it's interesting also that you bring up the about like uniting the Gentiles and the
Mhm.
Jews.
I was gonna say
So
something on that too.
I don't want to microphone hog.
Oh, that's okay. Well, I believe one of the core tenets of the Old Testament was to bring people to God. I'm not sure how it is in Judaism. I need to look into that. But for Christianity, it was to bring everyone to God, and the Jews did not do that. They kept to themselves and kept God pocketed. And so,
and throughout
um,
history, have continued to,
mhm. And
which I think is awesome. Sorry, Nick, I didn't
no,
mean to
that's okay.
interrupt.
That's absolutely fine. But that's what Judaism has turned into, is pocketing God to themselves while, and that's why Jesus died the way he did, was he came here for everyone because the Jews did not spread the word of God thoroughly enough. And maybe that's not how I should say it, but it became Jesus was the Messiah, and the Jews rejected him. The Jewish belief does not go past the Old Testament because they don't believe that Jesus was the Messiah, and that's why the Jews picked him instead of Barabbas to be crucified on the cross.
It's so interesting because
Mm-hmm.
one in Isaiah in the Old Testament, God says, "My house shall be a house of prayer for all the nations."
Mm-hmm.
So God was always into, or is into, bringing everybody to Him, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's been his mission all along.
So now, continuing on the theme of talking about Jesus, something I find so, guys, I find so fascinating, and I wanted to get your opinions and kind of what you think about it. Actually, is the end times. Okay, so Revelations. All right, the seals are broken, and then what I found out was that, and what I kind of knew anyway, was that there's different interpretations for exactly what happens when Jesus, who is apparently, and correct me if I'm wrong, apparently Jesus is at God's right hand at this moment, and then he will come back, and then that's where kind of the interpretations differ. One is that he'll raise everybody from the dead for their final judgment, and then which is kind of universal across the board. But then some people believe that the sinners and the wicked that didn't accept him will be obliterated, and then some believe that they will instead go to hell, and be able to and just kind of reside in hell from then on. I find the idea of the end times just so incredibly cool, and so I kind of just you guys are a little bit, maybe not a little bit, but you guys are more knowledgeable than I am about stuff. So I kind of want to get your opinion on this stuff.
It depends on which branch of Christianity you're talking about. At one of the institutes of learning that I went to, I took a class on this very subject, and there are a lot of interpretations. The most common is an actual literal interpretation of everything that happens, because some people say it's going to be modernized. Even like if you see there's descriptions of a flying demon with blonde hair, and you think, okay, that is physically, literally a demon with blonde hair, a flying demon with blonde hair. Or someone says, no, that's someone flying an attack helicopter and the pilot has long blonde hair. So that's getting into a part where it's already divided of whether it's going to be modernized or interpreted exactly as it is.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Eschatology is very interesting in and of itself.
Benny?
So yeah, I was gonna bring up the study of the end times in relation to the Bible is called eschatology, and Jesus, was the first. Jesus talked about it. Really, it goes all the way back into the Old Testament, because the book of Daniel talks a lot about the end times, and then Jesus during the Olivet discourse talks about the end times, and then Paul and Thessalonians, and Revelation in particular. You're right. There has been a lot of debate over. You have things like premill, premill, post-trail, millennial, premillennial, post-millennial. You have like pre-rapture, mid-rapture, post-rapture. You have like some people who say there's no rapture. There's some people who say there's no millennial. So there's a lot of, and there's a lot of people actually take hard stances on this. Like I had a buddy who was studying in seminary, and he studied at a seminary where if you wanted to teach at that seminary, you had to sign a contract that says that you subscribe to premillennial eschatology, right? So some people really they die on this hill. I don't really die on that hill. Out of all the hills in the Bible, that's probably one of the least ones that I would die on. But the way I like to sum up eschatology, particularly the book of Revelation, is that, and I think what I'm about to say is pretty universal, and that most divisions of Christianity will agree, is that John, who was writing Revelation, was writing this to the 7 churches in Asia Minor, and that's the whole thing. And he was describing all these things that were to happen, right? Now, whether they have happened or they are happening or they will happen, that's a whole different thing. But I like to think about it this way: that all these horrible things are going to happen on earth, or will happen, or are happening. But at the end, if you read the last 2 chapters of the Bible, I believe 21 and 22, it describes this beautiful, beautiful picture of what the kingdom of God will be like. And I believe that's the crux of the matter, that at the end, despite all the crap that we went through in our lives and all the crap that we're going through in our lives, at the end, God has already won. Not that God will win, but that God already won. And even if we die in this life, something crappy happens to us, we have that hope that at the end we're gonna hang out with God forever, and the streets are gonna be made out of gold, and the glass is gonna be made out of sea, and what's the other one? There's this giant beautiful tree. So that's how I see. That's how I would describe it. I think it's a very optimistic way of
Mm.
looking at it. Also, I would say.
So
That is the
uh,
end of Christianity in the Book of Revelation. Is everything comes to a beautiful end. There is a lot of horrible things that do happen. You know, with the Antichrist and the beast and the lake of fire, hell, the devil.
so
Go ahead.
a few interesting points. The first one is that I've always been a little bit hung up on the interpretations of what's going to happen when Jesus comes back. And by the way, Benny, thank you for going so in depth on the books of Revelation, man. Appreciated. That's actually very informative.
Mm.
So because the idea is when somebody dies, like right now, if like a plane crashed into my house and I died,
Mm.
I believe that like that people that I know would believe that I went to heaven or hell.
Mm.
I received my judgment and I went, right?
Mm.
But the apocalyptic view of Christianity is that in most cases that I've seen is that souls are kind of in limbo. They're kind of waiting for Jesus to come back and basically and either rapture them or either obliterate or go to hell or whatever. So
Mm.
what are you guys' viewpoints on that particular subject?
I would say it depends on which branch of Christianity you're looking at. If you're looking at Catholicism, you have the idea of purgatory, which is where your soul is in this limbo. You're in the middle of going to heaven or being sent to hell. The Protestants do not believe in this purgatory state. You believe you're either absent from the body, is in the presence of God, or you wake up in hell, which also is a holding place. Hell is not the end in a lot of eschatology. That lake of fire is, which is where all of those who rejected Christ and the devil go to be, I believe, essentially obliterated. Is the lake of fire rather than hell. Hell is like a tormentorous holding place, but it's still not particularly purgatory, which is where I believe nothing much happens.
Are you done? I don't want to like.
Yeah, go ahead.
judge
You
it.
go ahead. I was just looking at
So
stuff. Go ahead.
yeah, and that's something. Once again, those are hills that Benny is not gonna die on. A lot of people will. Yeah, like I said, there's more important hills in Christianity that are worth dying.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so interesting because like the Roman Catholics, they have the notion of purgatory, and then even you brought up the notion of limbo. Interestingly enough, those words are not found anywhere in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you look at the Apocrypha, which we'll talk about that next week,
Yeah.
their books of the Bibles that the Roman Catholics believe, but we don't. They get the idea of limbo from Maccabees, from First and Second Maccabees, but it never says limbo, like it never says purgatory or a waiting stage, and so
Mm-hmm.
I like that you brought it up, Devin, because it's one of those things that people have been fighting on. We don't know for sure, so that's something you'll learn about Christianity is that a lot of the minor, finer, more nuanced details
Mm-hmm.
people have been fighting for,
Mm-hmm.
hundreds and hundreds of years, and that's where
Mm-hmm.
you get a lot of
They'll say
denominations
that's where the
from.
denominations come from.
Yeah, but there are two main views on hell. There is eternal conscious torment and annihilationism. I
Mm-hmm.
think most people lean towards eternal conscious torment, which means that you go into hell or the lake of fire and you are basically torment. Now, a lot of people will also even go as far as to say that how you're tormented is
Mm-hmm.
varies on the
Who
theology.
you
Some
were
people
and
will
what you
say that,
did, even.
yeah, some people will say that, oh, you're just gonna you're going to be in constant pain for eternity. Some people say that no, the fact that you're alienated from God is a torment itself. So that's up for debate. That's
That
up for
So
that right
discussion.
there. Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
one thing I wanted to say though is that that's kind of one of the things that I find a little bit counterintuitive about this situation
Mm.
is because okay, let's say that it's pretty much mainstream belief that as soon as you die, you're judged. and you go either to heaven or hell.
Mm.
And then we
Oh.
have the end times happen. Okay. And the end times happen and a bunch of people die because it's the end of the world, essentially.
Mhm.
Well, when Jesus comes back, if that's the case, if you automatically go wherever you're supposed to go, which to me is the most logical idea,
Mhm.
personally, then it seems like the rapture, which I don't even think is called the rapture in the Bible. I think it has some other name. But
It's not mentioned in the Bible.
yeah, but basically, like when Jesus comes back to bring everybody with him, it seems like it'd be kind of a uneventful thing if everybody's already dead and they've already achieved judgment, whether for better or worse, heaven or hell. So that's one of the big
Well,
inconsistencies that I've seen. You
well,
know,
yeah, a lot of people will say that once you die, you go into this quote unquote sleep.
that's what I was saying with limbo.
Soul sleep. Hmm.
Well, not
Soul
even
sleep
limbo
and
because limbo,
purgatory is different.
Well, I mean,
yeah, it's
I mean, I
different.
was just it was
Mhm.
just me trying to come up with a
Yeah.
word
No.
for it off the top of
Absolutely.
my head.
Yeah. So like
Mhm.
there's people like Benny, like me, who don't believe in the rapture. I don't think the rapture it's a
Mhm.
thing. I think some people believe in it because they read the book of Revelation a specific way. I don't think uh, I like to say it this way. Jesus comes back and boom. Like that's it.
Mm.
You know. And the Bible says that when Jesus comes back, the dead will, the sea will spit out their dead, and the earth will spit out their dead, and those who live in Christ will be separated from those
Mhm.
who didn't die in Christ. So I, it's a big I don't know for me because I
Mhm.
kind of want to say that you would go into this quote unquote sleep state, and when Jesus comes back, you will be
Mhm.
resurrected, and then the judgment will take place.
We actually are getting some
Uh,
help right now from someone who's watching. Oh, it's a Spaceman Andy. One of our
What's up,
other.
Spaceman Andy?
He's
Word
one of
up.
our. He's one of our other residents of Lorecast. He wrote here on Twitch. He said, "Purgatory actually isn't for people who that go to hell. It's a cleansing fire." Means that people will eventually get to heaven after all of their sins have been cleansed. And then he also said people who go to hell in Catholicism straight up go to hell.
So yeah, that ties in with theosis,
Mm-hmm.
making you fit for divinity. So
Mm-hmm.
which is
divinization.
which
So
is something,
something.
if I might just add,
Of course, dude. Please.
which that is a concept that typically only Roman Catholics will hold to. Um,
Really? Okay.
yes, so Protestants, most Protestants would not be down or do not agree with the concept of purgatory or limbo. That most of the times, people who believe in that are Roman Catholic theologians. And I don't know much about the Eastern, about the Orthodox Church, so I can't speak for them. But I know for a fact that most Protestants, to my knowledge, do not hold to the view on purgatory.
Mm-hmm.
I think as a as a human that is flawed and wants good things, I think actually purgatory personally is a wonderful idea, and I hope that it's a thing for real. That's just my personal opinion, though. So,
Can I
Mm-hmm.
give the flip side of that coin? If you don't want me to, it's fine.
I would love the flip side of
Go
that coin.
ahead.
The flip side of that coin is that, like you were saying, you would love the idea of purgatory appeals to you because the cleansing fire cleanses your sins, and then you're ready to go into heaven. Is that what
Hmm.
you're saying? So the flip side of
Mm-hmm.
that coin, or the Protestant argument, would be that y- you don't you don't need the cleansing fires of purgatory
Mm-hmm.
because of the cleansing blood of Jesus.
Here's my issue with that, and this is not really meant to be a debate thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to debate, but I will tell you that my issue, actually, with that whole situation actually stems from something that happened in my life, and I'll make it very quick. Basically, I was doing some work on a house one time. Walked in there. There was a magazine on the fireplace, and it was a magazine full of serial killers and rapists and people who done very
Mm-hmm.
horrible stuff. And every single one of them, to a T, every single one of them, they'd interviewed them for this magazine, which is very morbid, and I have no idea what. But I read it, and every single one of them, no matter what they did, they were all like, "Yo, I'm cool. I'm going to be with God. I got it taken care of. Cleansing blood of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't say that, but I'm just borrowing Benny's term from earlier, which is awesome and I think great. I'm cool and I'm ready to go because I'm going to be with God.
Mm-hmm.
That to me, I personally, in my own very human opinion, and I'm not saying anybody's wrong. I'm just saying in my opinion, I think maybe there should be a little bit of cleansing fire for some people.
Well, go ahead.
Maybe not the normal person who just lives a normal life, but like for people who do stuff like that, maybe just my own my own kind of input on that.
Well, the problem with that is that in Christianity, you really have to mean it. God knows the intentions of your heart in Christianity, and if you just say, yeah, I killed 6 little girls who were 5 years old. I'm a Christian. I believe in God now. You can electrify me. That's not exactly how it's going to work.
If you were going to have a conversion, just honest question, Nick. If you were going to have a conversion, and is there any place that you would mean it more than looking at the electric chair?
That's true, but is that out of desperation or out of love for God? That's the issue that a lot of people have an issue with, is they just say, yes, I believe in God now because I'm about to die, rather than I have thought about it, I have debated with myself and my family. I believe in God because this is my relationship with God. That's the big thing about Christianity. It's all about relationships with God rather than just believing. You can just believe all you want, but Christianity is all about the relationship you have with God. If you just accept Him right at the end of your life, you haven't really done anything for God, and God hasn't done anything for you, and you haven't had that relationship quite yet.
Deathbed conversions are a huge deal, though, and
It is
throughout
a huge
history,
deal.
they've always been a huge deal. It's always been like, that's why last rites and things of that nature have always been important historically.
There's a biblical example when Jesus was hanging on the cross, the thief next to him.
The thief,
that's true.
Yes,
that's true.
So, and also remember that. So, half, if not most, of the Christian Bible is about people screwing up.
Yes.
Right. So the whole point of the Old Testament is basically God saying, you cannot do it without me. So I think it's valid to say that, and even Jesus said, 7 times shall the righteous fall, and 7 times shall he get up. So God, He doesn't want us to screw up, but He knows that we're going to screw up. So in the case of the murderers, the Christian view, the Protestant view, would be that, yes, let's say there's one fella, let's say Joey killed 7 people, 7 kids even, but then he finds the Lord legitimately.
Okay.
The Bible says that his sins are casted as far away as the east is from the west. Not that God doesn't remember that you killed all those people,
but
that He doesn't count it against you.
But you just, I mean, that really captures my entire point, though. So, because of original sin, basically, you or I, no matter what we do outwardly, remember the internal thing as well, the total depravity and everything, which is a sect thing, obviously, but just generalizing here, because of original sin, we have to go through the same transformation that Joe, the child killer, would have to go through. And if we both do it and we're both honest, we go the same place. And so, because I believe I believe God said, and I don't remember, or maybe Jesus or somebody said, Benny, please correct me if I'm wrong, or Nick, basically one small sin or 100 big sins is essentially the same idea in the eyes of God.
That's true. Sin, by definition, in Christianity is separation from God. It's anything that can separate you or harm your relationship with God. So lying to your mom about stealing $5 from her purse and literally blowing up an entire country are the same in God's eye, because sin is sin in God's eye. In basic Christianity, I believe. I would say.
I don't mean to sound like I know everything, but in the vernacular for sin, it comes from the Greek harmatios,
Mhm.
And harmatias was actually originally a sporting term. It was an archery term, and what it literally meant was to miss the mark. And
Mhm.
that's the image that the Bible uses. That every time we miss the mark, that is sin. So, and remember, we're the mark is God's standards.
Mhm.
So whether we miss the mark by
Mhm.
an inch or whether we miss the mark by a mile, we
Still
still
missed
miss
it.
the mark. Kind of like in sports. Like I throw the ball in football, I throw the ball, the guy catches it, and he catches it at the one, boom, gets tackled. I'm 1 yard away from a touchdown, but I still didn't get the touchdown.
Mhm.
The ball and the guy catches it at the 99, gets tackled at the 99, my own 99. The difference is still the same that we didn't make the mark, we didn't make the touchdown.
So
So what
is that um I kind of want to save the rest of this conversation for a future one so we can kind
Mhm.
of get back on track. But
Yeah.
thank
definitely.
you for clarifying that. That was very helpful. Um, both of you gentlemen who are wonderful, and I am glad to be on this with. I'm
Can I
totally
just
serious.
Okay.
You're
can I just
wonderful.
say this?
Mm.
Like
What's up?
I'm down for tabling it because it is such an in-depth conversation.
Mhm.
But I will say this, that yes, sin is sin and it's missing the mark. But remember what we said earlier, that the beauty of grace is that
Mhm.
it makes life not fair.
Mhm.
Fair for
I
Joe, who killed 7 kids, to receive grace, just like it's not
Mhm.
fair for me, who only lied to my mom once,
Mhm.
to get that grace.
Mhm.
I mean, at least you accept it's not fair. I mean, so
Yeah.
that's a start. But yeah, we'll get back on future
Definitely,
one
yeah.
because
It,
I have
Mhm.
a lot of questions that I want to ask. But
yeah.
let's so something interesting I found in my research for this
Mhm.
episode was actually something I did not, and you guys are gonna think I'm crazy, but I actually did not know that Christians in the beginning, because it's always been such a
Mhm.
Christianity is a conqueror religion, right? It's been conquering basically since its inception. But what I didn't know, and I freely admit this lack of knowledge until earlier, was that in the early days, Christians were actually heavily persecuted against.
Mhm.
And they I read specifically Nero, I guess, Roman, right? Nero made them they were allowed to
Mhm.
practice Christianity as long as they sacrificed to the Roman gods. And then later on, so eventually the problems with Christianity and the uh the people who weren't okay with it were like the general public, and then later on it reached the government and became official policy to
Mhm.
persecute until later on Constantine converted and made Christianity legal. But that was in 313, so
Mhm.
there was a significant amount of time where Christians were being persecuted. And
Mhm.
I wanted to ask if you guys had any thoughts on the
Uh,
persecution and kind of how that went
mhm.
and why that was and that kind of.
Um, the first persecution actually was from the Jews. Back in the biblical times, you have
Yes.
a lot of verses of, especially Paul. Paul was the biggest one. He was a, I forget what they're called. It's been a while since I've looked at the word. Um, he was a very high up Jew. And he was the one persecuting and killing Christians up until his
But then he
conversion.
converted.
Hmm.
Yeah, he converted.
On the road
So
to
and that's I mean,
Damascus.
but I mean, Paul converting
Hmm.
formed modern day Christianity. Like it formed Christianity
Hmm.
when he converted, because that's when, once again, that's when Gentiles were allowed in the door and to
Yes,
be a part of it.
he
So
was the preacher, the minister to the. He's the prophet to the Gentiles. That was Paul's biggest
Yeah.
role. Um,
Well,
and then the early Christians were Jews as well. That's why the persecution really happened, was because you had this sect of Jews who are like, Jesus is the Messiah and he is God, and then the Hasidic Jews or Orthodox Jews said, no, he's not God, and we will kill you for saying that. And that's where the first instances of persecution really came to be, was with the early Jews.
I mean,
even
but that's what caused the entire. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
my understanding, that's what caused the entire thing. Like that was the first like split.
Yes.
That's when Christianity split from Judaism, like
yeah,
formally.
that's where it cemented
Mhm.
itself as its
Yes.
own religion, because
Yeah.
it used to be viewed as a sect of
Mhm.
Judaism. And it's really
Correct.
interesting because Jesus even said, I get hung up on people who say, let me get on, let me just rant a little bit. I get hung up on people who say that, oh man, once you turn your life over to Christ, like everything's gonna be easy peasy,
Oh
which is
gosh,
not
no.
what Jesus preached. Like
Mm-mm.
Jesus preached the opposite, because Jesus said that we would be persecuted.
Mhm.
And then Jesus said, all the time, you carry your cross, die to yourself. You're gonna be persecuted when they break into the synagogues and drag you out. Remember, turn the other cheek. And so yes, persecution has always been part of the Christian tradition, even
Mhm.
in martyrdom, because to
Mhm.
die for to die for your beliefs. Like that's how you know your beliefs are sincere, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Like, would you put your life on the line for it? But a big part of the reason why is two Christians were persecuted, like you said, is because they weren't paid sacrifice to the Roman gods, and that was like a big deal.
Because they
Mhm.
were
And
Christian.
also, well, also because when you say Jesus is Lord of my life and of everything, whoa, well, what about Caesar? Is Caesar not Lord?
Mhm. Yeah.
So it got political for them too. So yeah, no, it's
Mhm.
well, I mean, even look at Daniel in the Old Testament. He got persecuted for his faith.
Mhm.
Don't two lines then.
All of the old
So,
prophets did.
So,
I
what was the circumstances surrounding Constantine?
well, Constantine's story is really funny because, um, so before Constantine, there was another guy, I can't remember his name. He basically made Christianity legal, but Constantine was the guy who made it the official state religion, right? So,
Hmm.
and the story behind that, it's really funny. So they were at war. Well, not funny, but it's interesting. They were at war, and he claims that he saw a vision or he heard a voice, and the voice said, "If you paint this symbol on your shields, you will win." And the symbol was the Christian cross. So they went and they painted the cross on their shields, and they won. They won the battle, and that's when he made, if I remember correctly, Christianity the official state religion.
Now, I
Uh,
pulled
and
something.
and
Go ahead, bud.
oh no, that's about it. If I heard correct me, my
Oh, I wasn't
that part of
correcting you.
history is always
I
crazy.
was actually going to add something that I found really
Mhm.
interesting. I found something on Wikipedia. My research from this obviously did not revolve around Wikipedia, but I did find this that was really, really cool. I'm going to quote Wikipedia right now. To the followers of traditional cults, Christians were odd creatures, not quite Roman, but not quite barbarian either. Their practices were deeply threatening to traditional mores. Christians rejected public festivals, refused to take part in the imperial cult, avoided public office. Wow, how things change. And publicly criticized ancient traditions. Conversions tore families apart. Justin Martyr tells of a pagan husband who denounced his Christian wife, and there were children that were disinherited as well. Traditional Roman society was inextricably interwoven into the fabric of Roman society and state, but Christians refused to observe its practices, as you mentioned. In the word of Tactic, Tac, Tacitus, Tacitus, Christians showed hatred of the human race. Among the more credulous claims, Christians were thought to use black magic in pursuit of revolutionary aims and to practice incest and cannibalism. And what interested me about that quote was that later on, when Christian organizations wanted to persecute other like people or religions, such as paganism or witches, later on, that was how they described them: black magic, incest, and cannibalism. Really simply, that's the toolkit that they used in order to get
Mhm.
their point across. And I found that incredibly fascinating. That there'd be such an easy line to draw between how Christians were perceived by some
Mhm.
groups a long time ago and how later on the kind of light that they cast on people
Mhm.
that they weren't fans of. So I just wanted to add that because I just thought it was really interesting that anybody would ever describe Christians like that. You know,
I mean, think about how they propaganda is such a
Mhm. Mhm.
powerful thing. And think about like the Nazis, how they describe Jews,
Mhm. Yeah.
and people got riled up behind that. And I'm not saying that the Christians who describe the people of other religions, like, I don't, that's obviously that's not justified, but just goes to show you how you take a very powerful idea and you shape it
Mm-hmm.
and you give it your own, and that's what and that's what sin does. Take it back a little bit to the, we take something that God gave us and we warp it and twist it, because of our depravity.
All
Mm-hmm.
right. So,
Mm-hmm.
the next thing I would like to get into, if possible, is I'd like to, I'd like to talk about the impact, positive and negative, of Christianity as a whole. So, not going
Okay.
into like particular ones like Catholicism or Protestants or Southern
Yeah.
Baptists or whatever, but just as a whole, the impact on the world, as a holistic picture
I
of a
was
religion.
actually about to segue into that. Was, you said we have been Christians have been persecuted, but Christians have also persecuted others, namely the Crusades.
Oh yeah, please go into the Crusades.
That is it's an impact that Christianity had on the world in actual history. I think the most interesting thing about Christianity and Judaism is there is a lot of archaeological evidence to support it, and a lot of people. There's a lot of arguments for and against Christianity, but that's one of the big ones for it. Is there's a lot of archaeological evidence for Christianity, for back things that happen even in the Old Testament. But this is something that really had a big impact was the Crusades. The first one was in 1096 to 99. And that is where Christians went into the Holy Land, and kicked out all the Muslims and killed all the Muslims. Then you had the Second Crusade, the Third Crusade. I'm not exactly sure what the other Crusades are about. I'm guessing they're very similar. Yes,
One
it's
one
all
interesting
about
thing.
getting out the Muslims out of the Holy Land.
So if you look up Crusades,
That's
because
what
I
I'm doing right
actually
now.
I looked it
'Cause
up
it's
so
been
that
a
I could give
minute
an
since
overview.
I've looked into them.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot
There
of
are
Crusades.
four.
Well,
Mhm.
there might be four big ones, but there's
Yes,
like
There's a
some
lot.
mini.
there's a lot
There's like a
more.
there's like a mini. There's like a bunch of mini
Mm-hmm.
that happen, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, most of them like involve like what you talked about, but one thing that I found interesting actually about those was that how they went about happening, right? Because like the
Mm-hmm.
Christians didn't just have like
Mm-hmm.
this army sitting around just like, like hanging out and waiting to like destroy, Muslims or whatever. Like they had to basically talk people into it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ways they did it I found very interesting, and actually is something that I find as a whole interesting about religious history, specifically in the case of uh, I believe Catholicism is the one who did this, is the idea of indulgences, right? So people went and
Yeah.
fought, and they got like basically a get out of jail free card into heaven, to say it with a little bit of levity, but I find that I find the concept of indulgences so interesting, and I kind of wonder why they don't do it anymore. I think that'd
Well,
be really interesting.
that's one of the, if you read Luther's, we'll talk about Protestantism next week, but if you read Luther's 99 Theses, like that's one of the
Mm-hmm.
big, that's like top 10. Like he was super against indulgences.
I
Um,
think I think we all should be, but
yeah,
but I don't know.
pretty
I found
churches, all those pretty churches in Europe, they're
yeah.
not
Mm-hmm.
justifying it. I'm just saying. So, but you bring up the Crusades, and it's really, the Crusades are interesting, as in
Mm-hmm.
they're they're not a good example
Mm-hmm.
of like religious warfare, because if you start digging into it,
Mm-hmm.
you find out that the reasoning behind the Crusades was really more political and economic. What it was, is that you had a lot of people who wanted to do pilgrimages to the Holy Land, to Jerusalem, during the
Mm-hmm.
time where Muslims were in charge of Muslims were in charge of, they ruled that land. So when Christian pilgrims wanted to go into the Holy Land, they couldn't, because they would be killed on the way. So that's actually where Knight Templars came from. They were
Mhm.
hired to protect the pilgrims, to escort them to the Holy Land, and it was and really it was the I want to say that it was the church who kind of thought it was a good idea, um, because once again indulgences and um, basically they found out they could make money out of it. That's what it was, and
Mhm.
not even just the church, but like the kings and queens and rulers of England, of I'm sorry, of Europe, England included, and so they were kind of the ones that petitioned the church to, they were the ones that went to the church and said, "Hey, wouldn't it be cool if you backed us up?" And the church was kind of
Mhm.
like, yeah, sure, why not?" So
Mhm.
it's more political
Yeah.
and economic
I
than,
was just
but there
reading
are
about that.
examples.
I
Mhm.
I'm sorry.
I really, really, in one of these episodes, want to get into the Knights Templar. I think the
Mhm.
Knights Templar is like seriously one of the most interesting historical aspects of Christianity as a whole, especially considering they were such a big deal, and then the persecution of them, and basically wiping them off the map, and King Philip and all that stuff, and that's something we're going to get into in a later one because I really want to talk about that. It's just like
Uh,
so cool and
and I want to
interesting.
look into it too because I don't know much about it. I'd be interested to see what I can find.
They
Mhm.
uh they were accused of demon worshiping, but the main reason was that the king at the time owed a lot of debt. He had a
Mhm.
lot of debt, and so it was almost strictly political that the Templar was taken down.
Mhm.
And once you start looking into the history of the medieval church, like before the Reformation, you start to realize pretty quickly that a lot of what went on was mostly political and
It really
economic.
was.
Mhm.
Yeah, so back it used to be in England, in the medieval times, where a king, if you had two sons, the older son became what? The new king.
Mhm.
The youngest son got into the church.
Well, I mean, because
Mhm.
throughout history, the crown, if there was a crown, as a monarchy or whatever, they had. I mean, they had their hands in each other's pockets. You know what I mean? Like very, very close.
Mhm.
And I mean, there's countless stories of historical figures and kings and queens and all that stuff who made decisions based solely upon the religious council of whatever the highest figure, their highest religious figure in
Mhm.
their council was. And that to me is like so crazy. It's like what if those people would have chose differently? Like how differently
Mhm.
would have history went if
Mhm.
they didn't say like, God, like said that we should do this, and whether they had a any actual connection that allowed them to receive that information, or whether they
Mhm.
just made their decision based on how they felt about it. Um, those people really, really changed the entire course of history.
Yeah.
And
And
please,
I was gonna say, and that's something that Martin Luther was really. We'll talk about this next week.
Mhm.
It'd be cool if, like, I'm not saying read all 99 theses, but if we could read some of them. Martin Luther was super, super against a lot of, and if you even like
Mhm.
look up a video on the life of Martin Luther and how he was
Yeah.
really against the
Mhm.
Pope, really, and how he
Well,
was really against indulgences.
mhm. Well, what I actually talked
Um,
to someone who is very, very devout Catholic, and he was letting me know that Martin Luther himself was a Catholic, and
Catholic monk, that's right.
mhm. And the issue he had was not with Catholicism; it was with those in charge of Catholicism, because the Catholics started saying, "Hey, God said this," but really it was greedy higher ups, and that is what he was really against. It wasn't he was meaning to split the church; it just happened because of corrupt people in high places.
And Martin Luther was actually, he was a Catholic monk.
Mm-hmm.
He was super educated. They
Mm-hmm.
took him to seminary. He was like a seminary professor. I think like they considered him like our equivalent of what a doctor would be, a doctor in theology. And you're right. Your friend is right that he never wanted to leave the Catholic Church. He never wanted to start its own thing. That wasn't until my boy Calvin and my boy John Knox in Scotland. They were the ones that said, "Hey, we want to do our own thing." But you're right. Luther at first did not. He wanted to remain in the Catholic Church
Mm-hmm.
because the word Catholic, in Latin, I believe in Latin or in Greek, it means universal.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why a lot of people say the Roman Catholic Church, because in and of itself, we're if you're part of any type of Christianity, you're in the Catholic Church, but not everybody is Roman Catholic. We'll talk about that next week, I guess.
So, do we all of it taken, and we didn't really get into some of the other stuff like one thing I really would like to talk about, maybe not in this one, but I'd like to talk about is some of the some of the
Mm-hmm.
kind of the smears on the history of
Mm-hmm.
Christianity. So you got Catholics and the whole situation with them, and
Mm-hmm.
the what do you call it, the scandals that are going on with them. You have the witch
Mm-hmm.
trials and King James,
Inquisition.
the
Mm-hmm.
Inquisition. Oh my God, the
If you
Inquisition.
want, we can go a little bit longer, right at an hour. If you want to go a little bit longer and talk about some of that, we can, because you want to talk about the positive and negative.
I wanted to go
Mm-hmm.
into the positive and the negative, and
If you want to like drop a couple, and then if we really want to go in depth in it and have like an introduction part 2, or like a an everything the church has done good section and everything the church has done bad section before we get into all the branches.
okay,
What you thinking?
that's
It wouldn't
either
be a
way.
bad idea. Yeah.
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 Okay,
Think.
cool. So so let's take the good first. Let's
Mm-hmm.
go into the good. What you gentlemen, what do you think the good is that Christianity as a whole, remember not the
Mm-hmm.
not going in depth, on Christianity as a whole has
Mm-hmm.
brought to the world, if any? And I mean I can name
Okay.
20 things off the top of my
Mm-hmm.
head, but I just kind of want to
Mm-hmm.
like for example Renaissance art.
Mm-hmm.
you know,
I was gonna say, as one of the unbiased hosts here, I would say some of the good things that Christianity has brought to us is a higher moral standard, I would say, within members of the Christian church and how they treat others. But that also can be part of the negative as well. But it's kind of in the middle, I would say. That's a good thing, I guess, I started with this one, because it's good and bad at the same time, depending on who you talk to and what kind of Christian they are. If they're really on fire for God, or if they are Christian in name only. They have brought a lot of good into the world. They do a lot of good for people. Um, they raise a lot of money for disasters. It depends if on the church as well, and who individually as well. But as a whole, the church has done a lot to advance the arts, like you said, Renaissance art. A lot of the early classical musicians were Christians. So a lot of the classic Bach music, was it Baroque period, all of that kind of music. Um, what else? Good. Uh, there we go. That's some good stuff right there.
Yeah. No,
all right,
I mean,
Benny.
Coming off
I
the top of my
well,
head, if I sat down and
obviously
looked.
obviously like all the endless charities that we
Mm-hmm.
have, and I'm a musician by trade, you could say. So I studied musical history, and like some of the most beautiful works
Mm-hmm.
ever written were religious in nature. Bach, Handel, and Haydn, even Mozart. Um, so obviously like all the beautiful art, all the great charity, but I think more than that, so the art, like for example, if you live in a Western culture, Christianity contributed a lot to our Western culture, because, for example, a lot of the judicial system laws that we have in place come from the Bible. Some of them obviously predate the Bible. Like, did you know that the presumption of
Mm-hmm.
innocence is the oldest written law in history in Hammurabi's code,
I did
and
not know
that's
that.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the presumption of innocence is the oldest written law. It was the first law in Hammurabi's code, and that's like the one of the founding ideals behind our justice system.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, like the culture, um, the politics behind it, but I also want to say, like, as far as like the spiritual aspect of it. So there are a lot of by being, as humans, we desire to be part of something, and we desire to be part of a group.
Mm-hmm.
And studies have shown that there are a lot of psychological benefits to just going to church. and
Mhm.
Christianity. Not that other religion, obviously, if you're Jewish, you can go to a synagogue. If you're Buddhist, you can go to a temple. Same.
Mhm.
But because we live in a Western society, and most people around us, they're more Christians than any other religion, like you guys said at the beginning. Their Christianity is more accessible, which is the only reason I say this. But also, I think the biggest impact um, on Christianity, and this is something that as we study, or as you guys study religion and other religions and really dove into them, Christianity, to my knowledge, is the only religion, and and I'm about to open a can of worms, and we can talk about it later.
Mhm.
Christianity is the only religion in which you don't have to try. But what I mean by that, it's not works based. Is really what I should say.
Mm. But works without faith, I mean, faith without works is meaningless. That's
Right.
another core tenet of Christianity. You can't just sit on your butt. You can't just say, "Hey, I'm a Christian," and then die. 80 years
Oh,
down the road. That's not how it
but
really
that's the
works.
fun part. No, that's the fun part. First of all, you guys should
Oh
know
gosh.
that, and you might know. No, no, no,
Mhm.
no, no. This is what I'm about to say is not controversial. What I'm
Mhm.
about to say is true. The fact is that right now there's a crisis happening in this country because although there's a lot of people that on paper identify as Christian, the churches are actually having a very hard time filling their pews. And
Mhm.
there is a like legit church crisis going on. Nobody's going to church, and there's a
Well,
reason. Well, there's two reasons. The first one is that secularity is rising in America. It's roughly about 25% of Americans right now.
Mhm.
And the second thing is the fact that in Christianity, you don't have to go to church. You are your own temple.
Mm.
You are your own church. You are your own pastor in some sects. Not every single one of
Mhm.
them, obviously.
Mhm.
But I mean, isn't that what Jesus said? Correct me if I'm wrong. But
The
you,
Bible itself says, "Do not deny fellowship with others."
that's
Of
in
you,
Hebrews.
you're not allowed to. You you're not supposed to. If you worship in the bathroom by yourself, if it's in a country where that you can, and that's all you can do, I'm suppose that's okay. But as a whole, you're supposed to um, gather together in masses on.
yeah.
You're supposed
Well,
to.
not necessarily masses, but you are
You're
right,
supposed
Devin.
to.
That
Mhm.
I'm sorry, Nick. I didn't want
No,
to.
no, it's fine. It's fine.
Oh, you are right, David, in that like we no longer have to go before the holy of holies. Like when Jesus died on the cross, like the veil ripped. And there's actually a very interesting wordplay in the book of John where it says, "And and God came, the Spirit came in us." So the word that it uses is the same word as in the Old Testament. It's a tabernacle. So what it's saying is God tabernacles inside of us. But the Bible does say in Hebrew that we shouldn't forsake the assembly of the saints, like that we
That's the
are
word. There you
to
go.
gather together.
Hmm.
Yeah, and the Bible also says in Romans that Paul asked a rhetorical question: shall we sin more so that grace may abound more? In other words, the more we sin, the more grace we get. And
Hmm.
then Paul says, absolutely not.
Hmm. That's
Uh,
a negative that I would say that Christianity has had is a lot of Christians believe that, hey, I'm covered by the blood of Christ. Let me go steal and I'll go ahead and just repent. Yeah, I'm sorry for stealing, God. Won't happen again. See you next
which
Sunday.
which that can be legit. Like
Hmm.
you can legit fall into sin and then repent.
But if it's
But
but repentance means turning away from it
using it
completely.
as an
So,
excuse is what you're
hmm,
saying.
yes, a lot
Yeah.
of Christians, I would say, use it as an excuse. And another negative of Christianity is that a lot of Christians don't really do anything with their Christianity. Like we saying, they sit around and say, "Yeah, I'm a Christian. Cool," and then cool, I guess, thank you, but it's not really
I
saying
would
anything.
I would say that, I mean, obviously, I'm the biased guest, so I would say that those aren't negatives of Christianity as a whole. I think those are just negatives of people, that misinterpret what the Bible says
Hmm.
and that get
Actually,
complacent.
I want to interject on this because you're hitting on something that actually I think is a
Hmm.
really interesting fact. So I'm trying to think of how to say it without sounding.
Um.
So let me say it like this.
Mhm.
Uh, I think because I haven't given my positives or negatives yet. Um,
Mhm.
but I'll say that my positives are that Renaissance art, which is some of the most
Mhm.
beautiful art ever made, um, some of the most beautiful humans I've ever met were true blue, honest to God followers, and they tried to live their life in godly ways, and that's something that I drastically appreciate in such a messed up and difficult world to live in. But one problem that I have found myself, like my head kind of butting up against when it comes to all religion, not just
Mhm.
Christianity, is that in many cases it is so clearly man-made. And so the reason I say that, before you guys like jump on me, the reason I say that is because, as I said earlier, churches are not able to get people in the door anymore.
Mm.
People are not,
Mhm.
no, this is not obviously saying every community, every place. This is not saying that. I'm just
Mhm.
saying as a whole, it's becoming a big problem. And the what you're going to find, I think I'm going to do a little prediction here. I'm going to predict that the qualifications to become a Christian these days are very, 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 very low. I myself like have been saved, and everything like that. And so like um very low. But I think as time goes on, Christianity, as they start losing more and more people to secularism and other
Mhm.
religions, they're going to have to lower the bar even further. And that's when like that's I
Mhm.
mean that's why like indulgences and stuff was, right? Because people are going to do whatever. And if you can kind of like keep them in the loop,
That's mine. Sorry.
it's all good. But if you can kind of keep them in the loop a little bit, it's like the army, right? Okay, like hear me out. But hear me out. The
Mm.
army, there's really high standards to get into the military.
Mhm.
But when they start running low on people, they crank down the standards and let basically anybody in the door. And then after there's enough people, they crank it back up again. Okay?
Mhm.
And I kind of think we're going to see that with Christianity in America,
Mhm.
although they won't be the only ones. There'll be other
Mhm.
religions internationally that kind of fall into that same kind of situation.
Mhm.
But the problem is that the Bible is a very conflicted and it's inconsistent. Like as somebody who's read it, and you both have clearly read the Bible, so I'm sure you'll understand where I'm coming from, even
Mhm.
if you don't agree. It's very inconsistent. It's incredibly conflicted. The information in it is conflicted,
Mm.
and I don't know if there's anywhere in there that specifically definitively that can't be fought against in another part of the Bible says what the actual qualifications are to get into
Mm.
heaven. You know what I mean? Like besides accepting Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior
Mm.
in many sects, but pretty much all of them. But
Mhm.
so anyway, that's a little bit of a scatterbrain way to put a point,
Mhm.
but I hope I got it across. You guys have any opinions on that?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Here, let
You
me.
want to go first, Nick?
I got some stuff here in the chat here on Twitch. We have a video voyeur. And Spaceman Andy again. We have with Spaceman Andy says also with churches, a lot of the church culture has become destructive to people. Um, Not every place is like that, but everyone has an example of a time when a church people screwed them over. And then we have a video voyeur who says, I wonder if the connectedness or the world through the internet is affecting church attendance. Seems like people go out a lot less now that we are connected with the other side of the planet instantly through a virtual or electronic sense. Then we have Andy again saying, also, this should be noted, this problem with churches is more noticeable in North America and Europe, whereas in Latin America and Africa, conversions are exploding. So it's a North America and European thing. In Latin America and Africa,
Yeah,
there
that's what
are a
I said
lot of new
in
members
in
coming in.
America. But okay, so first of all,
Mm-hmm.
Andy, thank you for chiming in.
Mm-hmm. And a video voyeur.
Definitely, I think we all have a story of bad
Mm-hmm.
church experience.
Oh yeah,
I
Westboro
think we
Baptist put
also
a little,
probably have
yeah.
good ones too. I know
Mm-hmm.
that I have some wonderful, but something that I wanted to point out, actually about what Video Voyeur said before you guys go into what you want to say,
Mm-hmm.
is actually that I stayed with a very heavily Christian family when I lived in California, and one of the things that really really stuck out in my mind was that yes, they had a church that they went to every Sunday on their computer. They attended via live stream, and that's true. Like that's something I hadn't even thought about factored in, but it's 100% true. I've watched it with my own eyes. They actually had me sit down and watch the service with them. They asked me to, and you know me, I'm nice and awesome, so I was like, yeah, sure, of course, I'll sit down. And it was really interesting and really cool, but
Mm-hmm.
um, I would prefer, I think, to actually be there in person. But I did think it was
Mm-hmm.
cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, please, Benny and Nick, please take over.
So three things. One about the secularization of America.
Mm-hmm.
That is a trend that is very consistent throughout history. So as nations become more developed, they get quote unquote secularized. The prime example, obviously, is Europe. So you go to Europe and you see all these beautiful, grandiose churches, and the pews are empty. So Europe is what has become what is known
Mm-hmm.
as a post Christian society. You know, at one point, like most missionaries came from Europe, but
At one point, you
as a so-
killed if you weren't.
right,
Mm.
well, is what I'm saying. Like, and the turn of the 20th century and even to the 20th century, really the turn of the 20th century, Europe
Mm-hmm.
became more quote unquote less Christian, and that's a trend that
Mm-hmm.
in America that seems to be the case. I mean, at one point it
Mm.
was like,
Yeah,
you know,
the
church attendance was through the roof.
40s and
So yes,
50s, if you didn't go to church,
yeah.
you were a nobody in society as a whole in the
I mean,
40s and 50s.
I guess in in some
I
cultures it could be like
I would
that.
say the entire culture of America. I mean, if you were a mob boss and didn't go to church on a Sunday, who wants to do business with you if you're not going to
American
church?
culture was very, very, very tight in back
It
in the day.
was
Mm-hmm.
different, but I just wouldn't make that, you know, generalization that like if you didn't go to church or nobody. But I can see
I've
how
talked
it
to
could
a
be.
lot of older people who say that, but that's just where I
That's
come
it.
from. Is coming from talking to older people who
Like
were
I
like
said,
a
it.
child in that time, and they would see someone who clearly is not really a Christian but still going because it's something you did in the 40s and
Yeah.
50s.
So I guess it could be true, like in some parts, but just the general idea is that yes, like more developing countries, there's a direct correlation between, you know, I hate to say this, but there's a correlation between low income and
Mm-hmm.
high church rates or
Yeah.
religion. You know, the
Mm-hmm.
prime example is, for example, in here in the United States, the
Yeah.
Southeast
Yeah.
per
Oh gosh.
typically tends to be more poor
Mm-hmm.
or less income than like
Yeah.
New York, California, but we have higher church attendance rates. So
I am
Mm-hmm.
that's
going to be
normal.
very real with you right now. I am so surprised that you brought that up.
Mm-hmm.
I am so surprised. I'm impressed that you brought that up because I wasn't going to bring it up, but
I was going
that is
to as well.
awesome.
It's
It's
because
a
you
it's a
also have
fact.
the Bible
It is a
Belt.
fact.
The Bible Belt and the Meth Belt are the exact same belt. Um, Pretty much, it's like 90% the same
Oh, that's
thing.
true.
And meth is traditionally, statistically, a poor people drug because you can make it
Affordable drug.
out of like kitty litter and stuff like that. So it's a poor area, especially is if you get away from the big cities of like Atlanta and Nashville. I would say even Atlanta, which is where I live,
Even
really close
then,
to it, it's still pretty
yeah.
poor unless you live in like Midtown. So one little section of one city is nice compared to the rest of the state.
So I
Um,
think that the trend is going to be like
mhm,
eventually when these developing countries become developed, they too will get secularized. So that's also remember how I was saying earlier that they well, I don't know if I said it, but I guess I'll say it now. The
mhm,
human
mhm,
tendency is to want, and especially as Americans, but this applies to everybody. The human tendency is to want to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, right?
mhm,
That
Yes.
is the human tendency to want
mhm,
to work your way up. And in a lot of religions, particularly Buddhism and Hinduism, you have to work your way up to reincarnate into a
mhm,
higher caste. We have that tendency in the book of in I forgot in the Old Testament. I forgot which book. When Moses, I believe it was in Exodus, went up to receive the law from God.
mhm,
When he came down, he found his own people had made themselves a golden bull.
mhm,
So that it's this tendency to want to pull ourselves. But remember what I said. The whole point of the law is God saying, you can't do it without me.
mhm.
That's
So the
why.
question is, can you? I think is the eternal question, and we're not going to have an answer. But
The answer, the oh my gosh, I don't mean to sound like a jerk or anything, but the I'm really not. But that's where I would have to disagree. Is that the answer, according to the Christian faith, is that there is a yes, no, you can't do it by yourself, which is why Jesus, once again, because Jesus had to come down and down the cross for you. And I think it's really interesting how you brought up the point of, well, Christianity is gonna have to keep lowering the bar. I think that the bar is Jesus. And yes, there are a lot of flawed people in this world, just like in every religion, who misinterpret the text or who interpret it differently. And obviously that is true
Hmm.
for Christianity. But I think the
Well,
bar is in the
well,
Christian
when I
doctrine.
say the
hmm.
bar, I don't mean as far as the value of people. That's not what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
What I mean is the bar um as far as the thing is that you can like say you
Hmm.
believe all day, not you in general. I'm just saying
Yeah,
just people
people in
Hmm.
general.
can exactly can say they believe all day. They can say whatever they want to say, but the truth is, as Nick said earlier, um, you they're you have to
Hmm.
you have to believe it and you have to mean it, right? It has to be something that you feel in your soul, in your heart, and it's got to be important to you. But there's no way for churches to know whether that's true or not
Hmm.
because there's only one being that would know that.
Hmm. So with
You know
you,
what I
it's
mean?
between you and God. So you
It's between
yourself
you and
would
God.
know, and God would know. That's it.
So
Well,
I don't know. I
Hmm.
think, but like if you say
Hmm.
basically, um, you know, like you're guaranteed to go to heaven. You're a religious authority. This would probably apply more to like the Pope and like Catholicism than it would in America anyway. But like you're a religious authority like the Pope, and you say, "Yo, check it out. If you do this one thing, right? You make sure to do this one thing every week, and you're guaranteed. There's no questions. You're going to heaven. God told me. He called me up on my iPhone. Like it's happening. Like make it happen." Then maybe that would boost like people's attention or care because like when we're talking about the bar being Jesus, we're talking about such a high bar. Jesus was a perfect
Hmm.
individual,
Well, here's
and
the.
so
You go ahead.
I don't know. I'm just
The problem with the people thinking that Jesus is the bar is that he said, "Be holy as I am holy," but the translation, because the word in Greek has another meaning, it's complete. Be complete as I am complete, and he is complete through God the Father. He's not saying, "Hey, be perfect because I am perfect." He's saying, "Be complete because I am complete through God the Father."
but
well, translations is another issue we'll have to get into in another
Yes.
one because that's a very
The.
fascinating subject.
because
Mm-hmm.
also holy in the Old Testament also meant set apart. So be holy because be set apart, be different from, and that pertains more to the actual law, but it also pertains to us. Be different from those around you because I am different. But I like what you said, Devin.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, holy crap, if Jesus is the bar, like, oh my gosh. But I like how you say that because that's the point. Like,
Yeah.
holy crap, God is the bar. Like, that's exactly how you're supposed to react. Like, if we can't do it by ourselves and God is the bar, holy crap, how do we? But that's the point of Jesus coming down and
So
dying on the cross.
do you think that our culture is going to become do you think our
Mm-hmm.
do you think we're going to become even more secular and we're going to like
Um,
move on to a post-Christian society because I don't think we're quite there yet.
I think
Well,
But
I think we're in the very beginnings of it, especially
yeah.
within the educational system. I think that's where it's going to start. Really, is the education and media. I think that's where it starts with anyway. Really,
Yeah.
but here in the United States of America, I attend a college. Don't want to dox myself and say which one it is, but um, it is a college that is extremely secular. I mean, sure, it's in the South. I'm in the South. I'm near Atlanta. If you listen to the podcast, you know I'm very close to Atlanta. Um, and anytime you're in a big city, the media and educational systems are very secular. They want the whole separation of church and state thing. They take it very literally, and they don't want anything. They don't want anything to do with it. And if you went around campus and asked everyone, "Hey, are you a Christian?" They'd probably be like, "No, absolutely not. That's an old people thing. That's like what my grandma is." So it's not the hip new thing like it was in the, not the hip cool thing to be like in
Jesus
the, like I
movement in
would
the
say
60s, yeah.
like I would say in the 60s, the 40s to 60s, which was like almost a part of society as a whole, where I'd say we're in the very beginnings of that post-Christian society. I mean, a lot of people like to say that America was founded upon Christianity, but really it wasn't. I mean,
It
you
was
know,
not.
I
mhm.
don't think you can make that.
I think it was
I mean,
well, a lot of, if you go, if you live in the South, a lot of
I
people
mean,
say, "Hey, George Washington was a
America was
Christian."
America was founded by people who were running from religious. They were running from religious persecution.
Persecution,
yeah.
but
Well,
So I mean,
it was
it's for them, for people that were running away from religious persecution to form a religious
yeah,
society is just 100%
yes,
in my opinion. Just please don't take it the wrong way, but it's the most
mm-hmm.
ridiculous idea I've ever heard.
but in
Um,
regards
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
in regards to the there's a whole different in regards to like the founding of our nation. I think it's really interesting because like we legitimately had a lot of actual devout, or some of our founding fathers were legitimately Christian.
Mm-hmm. That's where the idea
A
comes
lot of them were
from.
also deists. Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of them were also deists, and a lot of them were, atheists. So we
Mm-hmm.
have this mix. But I like what Thomas Jefferson said, that
Yes, that's what I
all
was about to
humans are
quote.
endowed
He's
by
the
their
one.
creator.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I mean, Thomas Jefferson was, but what he said is all humans are endowed by their creator. So it's like we have these unalienable rights that are given to us. If you're a Christian, oh, then God gave it to you.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not a Christian, you still have those rights.
Well, the problem with saying creator is it implies one singular being, and that's
Right.
a lot of the people. That's where the idea of Christianity being founded upon, or America being founded on Christianity, came from, was that
Right.
George Washington was a Christian. I think Thomas Jefferson was as well, or maybe he was a deist as well. But I mean,
Ben Franklin was a deist.
yeah, and it says
Which deism is another one I want to get into because I
Mhm.
find it very fascinating.
I don't know if that's if it's part of Christianity or if it's its own religion. I think it's just
No, that'll be down the line. Deism will be
okay.
down the line.
Okay.
I'm down for that. Deism can be
Mhm.
interesting. Yeah.
Because deism works with the absent God, the idea of the absent God, which is
Okay.
just
Okay.
incredibly cool.
Mhm.
And actually makes a lot of sense from a more contemporary
Mhm.
point of view, like a more contemporary idea of what God's
Yeah.
purpose is in the overall
Mhm.
universe. Um,
Mhm.
but that's we don't need to like be getting into
Yeah. Well,
like,
I
crazy
was
stuff right now, but we'll get there.
I was gonna say also a lot of the media, like I was saying. Oh, thank you. A video voyeur just said Jefferson was a deist. So thank you very much for clarifying for me.
Video for coming through.
A lot of the media, like I was saying, schools and media are the big ones. Like if you look at Rick and Morty, I mean, it straight up tells you. And Rick and Morty, it's for adults, yes, but you know who really watches it is like 13 to 15-year-old kids. And he straight up says, "Hey, God's dead. God's a lie." In
Well, he's
the
a very
show,
nihilist character. Yeah.
they
But
themselves
I mean,
are.
didn't Nietzsche say God's dead like forever ago?
Yeah,
Like,
I mean,
Was,
but there's a difference between saying,
yeah.
well, he said there is no God, and the saying God is dead and we killed him is a little bit different. That means we no longer. I believe that means we no longer need God. The idea of
outdated
God,
idea, yeah.
But he says, hey, there is no God in like the first episode. So he's ripping that Band-Aid off right now, saying, hey, I'm not a Christian, and if you
So-
watch this show, you're not gonna get any Christian ideas. And
I don't. But the thing is it's not the media's job to inform. And this is something like this is a very very fierce debate in our country right now, and it's not necessarily one that I think we should be having on here.
Yeah.
But I will say that I don't think it's the media's job to tell anybody what to believe in any way. And so I find the idea that Rick and Morty, if they said there is no God, or if they said yes 100% there is a God and you should follow him, I think both of them are equally none of Rick and Morty's business. I think that's between people and their own spiritual well-being and their own families and their own cultures, that they have to make that determination. And but I will say that if anybody's taken religious advice from Cartoon Network shows, that's probably their first mistake.
Yeah.
And that goes either way. I mean, like Futurama. Like, did you see the episode of Futurama where Bender met God? It's very fascinating. It's very fascinating.
You would think that Peter from Family Guy would be a Christian because of how many times he's actually met God and Jesus. Especially I'm sorry, Peter Griffin is a Catholic, but Brian is an atheist, and Brian has met God and Jesus many a time in the show.
Seth
Oh yeah, I
MacFarlane's an
mean,
atheist.
What's
there's
that? Oh yeah, Seth MacFarlane is.
there's
Can I just-
of course, please.
I was gonna say, like, in regards to
Mhm.
what I have to just agree with Nick was saying in the same regard that, yes, I think, as I live in America, we will become a more quote unquote secularized society, and I think church numbers will drop. I think that's just, if the trend follows, which I think it will, is just gonna happen. But what I would say is that, my big question that I ask sometimes to people, and even to myself, really, I ask this to myself a lot of times, like, do I go to church because of the people, to see what people are up to and to see the perception, or do I go to church because of God and the godly reasons?
Mm-hmm. You only
what I
have
would
to
say.
you
And-
only have to ask that in the South, because if you go up north, like say like New York, if you see someone going to church, then they're going to church because they love God. You
I
can't,
think that's true.
because New York and
think-
California, they are statistically secularized more because of the amount of people that there are and the amount of religions that are in those, two states specifically. If you go to church, you're going to church because you love God. You're not going because you want Jimmy to see you down the street going. It's because you're like, hey, I want to go.
Yeah, it's
there's-
definitely not the social event of the
Mhm.
century.
If you go,
in
Oh,
those
what-
areas.
but down here in the
What-
South, you have to ask yourself that, because you're like, wow, Jimmy from 2 doors down is going to the church 5 feet from me, but I'm going to the church that takes me 5 minutes to get to. And you're like, because especially in the South here, if you stand at one church, at the front door of one church, you can throw a rock in any direction. I guarantee you will hit one. And the city I grew up in and went to high school in, there were literally 4 churches within 2 minutes of each other. So it's a question you have to ask yourself in the northern parts or the western parts of the United States. It's here in the South.
I don't think that's true, Nick. I mean, I love you, bro, but I just think that
I think it's true.
No, I think that as every religious person around the world, in every corner of the world, whether you live in Africa or in Antarctica, I think you should ask yourself that question, because there's
Mhm. Well,
nominal
yeah.
religiosity everywhere.
Well, that's the question. You have to ask yourself. You have to ask yourself those questions. Otherwise, you're not. That's another thing that I believe.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So
yeah, go ahead.
I guess then the question is, if you're not going to church because you
Mhm.
truly love God, but instead you're going because you want to see Jimmy 2 doors down.
Mhm.
I don't know why you don't want to see Jimmy from 3 doors down. I mean, they had a few.
Well,
hits.
I meant like,
Anyway,
you want him to
my
see
point
you
being,
go to church.
My point being is, either way, you're going to these gatherings, and either way, you're taking part in the overall religious makeup of your environment or wherever you live.
Mhm.
So can we call that one? Can we call that one a draw? You know what I mean? Even if you're not going necessarily, because how many people? Okay, like, guys, seriously, how many people do you know, including yourselves? And you do not have to answer this question, but just saying, just think about it. That like really, genuinely, no crap. Like they pray every night. They love God with all their heart. They just they're devoted to God. Because the thing is, and the greatest inconsistency that I can think of, not that I'm really looking for inconsistencies, but the greatest one I can think of is the fact that I think that if you truly believe in the events in the Bible, you truly believe in the lessons of the Bible, you truly believe in the Bible, then you probably should be following every word of the Bible to the letter. But
well, the problem is the Old Testament was based upon, we can talk about this when we get to Judaism, but there was these 400 rules and laws that the Jews were given, and they said, hey, follow this completely. But then Jesus came in the New Testament and said, hey, I'm going to wrap it up in 2. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. So that's the thing. There's not really a lot of inconsistencies in the Bible, because a lot of it is clarified in the New Testament, whereas it may be convoluted and ridiculous in the Old Testament, it is simplified and put together in the New Testament.
So
What do
we
you mean?
would, but I mean, the thing is
Mhm.
there's never been, in my opinion, there's never, and I could be correct, but there's never been anything that specifically said, yo, look, check it out. In the Old Testament, we
Mhm.
said kill witches. We didn't mean that, bro. Don't
Mhm.
kill any witches. In the Old Testament, we said gay people all need to like die or something, right? Or like they're abominations.
Mm,
Takes these backsies, homie.
mm,
Okay, like there's nothing that, and I'm being, obviously I have a little bit of levity here. I'm just like kind of
mm,
being a little jokey about it, but like what I'm saying is that there is no real distinct line between what in the Old Testament
mhm.
is like universal law, right? So the
Yeah.
commandments, universal law, you're not taking it back. The 10 commandments are the tenets. They are kind of what, and
Yeah.
Jesus kind of added to them instead of subtracting from them. But
We kind of summed them up. That's
He
yeah,
what
I
summed them
mean,
up.
he kind of
the
made it.
golden rule is. It's a summing up of all those laws and all of the 10 commandments into two. Because they were
Yeah.
like, "Hey, how can we follow these things?" And he says, "Hey,
And
love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul. Treat your neighbor as yourself."
the
That's
impl-
what that meant to be.
yeah, and I would even go as I like what Nick. I would even
Mm,
go as far as to say that, obviously, from a very biased perspective, that there are no contradictions in the Bible. You know, we can talk about this all day, but obviously that's my personal bias. But uh, the idea, what Jesus was getting at the heart of things is what he was doing. See, Jesus was all about and producing an inward change that would eventually spill out. So Jesus was all about the inside out, right? So what Jesus was saying is that if you love God, above anything else, and you love your neighbor as yourself, you won't do any of the crap. Like you won't steal from your neighbor if you love him
mm-hmm.
as yourself. You won't murder your neighbor if you won't worship other gods if you love God above anything else. That's the implication. What he was saying. And yes, I'm not gonna say that everything in the Bible it's like laid out, you know,
Yeah, it's
bullet
not like a
points.
red carpet, which would be really nice
Right.
and easy.
I think we should
Yeah,
eventually
but
also
Mm,
actually do a deep dive on the Bible, because it is
mm-hmm.
such a
Mm-hmm.
fascinating, and the Apocrypha too. Or did I pronounce that wrong?
yeah,
Yeah,
Apocrypha.
thank you. Apocrypha. Thank you.
Then you have the Dead Sea
Um,
Scrolls and all that
so
too as well.
that's
I
part
still
of,
have to read the Dead Sea Scrolls. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't. I haven't. I
well,
must.
they're written in Hebrew,
Yeah.
so
So, well, I mean, they have translations, but
Mm-hmm.
okay.
well,
Go ahead.
So,
yeah, we'll talk about
gentlemen,
that later.
Yeah, but say it's
yeah.
about time to wrap up. We're at an hour and
Oh, I mean, I
37
loved
right
it, guys. This is
now.
a great episode.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you guys? Is there anything you want to
Yes,
say?
I got two
Uh,
things.
I got one thing.
More from a video voyeur. We'll do one. He said two things, but we can do one because one of them's gonna be like it's another media thing. But we'll go with this last thing he said. He said video voyeur says, "I'm near Philadelphia, and I can agree with you. Observation of U.S. religious geography. Liberalism is literally its own religion in the Northeast and West.
Not a waste.
So yeah, I guess he
I can see
says
that.
when you go up north, it's more.
Minute.
And
Yeah.
not only that, but science
Mm-hmm.
is taking on actually a more, like, there's like
Yeah.
devout science people who
Yeah.
devoutly follow evolution and science, which
Mm-hmm.
I think is very fascinating. Um,
Would that?
but
Yeah, that would be a debate. Would be like, would the government need to stop funding science if it becomes its own religion because of the separation of church and state? And the way that science is taught in schools today is very much religious like. So you
I would
get a
agree
lot
with
of
that.
double standards when it comes to the way the government handles science in its own.
well, this is
Mhm.
something that's going to have its own thing,
Yeah,
because
it
the
will.
problem with that is that science has a process that religion isn't subject to.
Mm.
But we
Hmm.
won't go into that right now. That's
Yeah,
cool. Gentlemen,
absolutely.
Benny, you got anything for us, buddy?
Yeah, I'll just say that I'll just reiterate what I said earlier. Like as we study different, which I believe everybody should study world religions. As we
Hmm.
study world religions, you will find that Christianity is very unique among a lot of them, because it's the only religion where one, our God died for us. Two, we don't have to work our way up the chain. There are a lot of things that we are called to do, but to obtain salvation, we don't have to, you know, we don't have to like toil to the top. And Paul talks about that. So I just think Christianity is very unique in its approach to life and philosophy. And I think
All right.
if you live in a Western culture, it's worth at the very least looking into.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we hope that this episode of Lorecast, the religion Christian overview, we hope this has been informative to you. I'd like to thank my co-host, my lovely, beautiful human friend, Nick, for being himself and being awesome. I'd like to thank our guest, Benny, who has been absolutely awesome and informative. If you like this stuff, make sure that you hit it up. You hit that like, that subscribe, whatever else you need to hit.
Yeah,
make sure you do it, because we are going to get into the granular aspects of one of the sects. I'm not sure which one yet. Maybe Protestantism, maybe Catholicism. One of those. Next week, we'll have Benny back to come talk about that as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. And and I'm Devin. And make sure to check me out at beetlemilk.com if you want to. And guys, it has been an absolute honor and a pleasure to sit down with you tonight and have this conversation.
It's been amazing.
All right. Let me close this out then. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of Lorecast. If you'd like to check out any of the people, check out Benny on Twitter. You can check out Devin on Twitter as well, and check out beautymilk.com to see all of his wonderful products. And be sure to check out Lorecast on Sunday nights, where we talk about goofy lore in like anime, manga, TV shows, movies, whatever else you can think of. And check out Originate Games, where I've been doing a lot of gaming stuff on YouTube and a little bit of Twitch. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys Sunday or next Wednesday.
Sunday.
All right, bye.